hands on the track.
Unlearned, unlimited. What? Unlearned, unlimited.
Yo, welcome to our podcast, Unlearned, Unlimited. My name is Dr. Sito, Narcisse, and I got my co-host,
Tatiana, Echevarria, and yes, we did switch seats.
Yes, that usually means that, we got to keep them guessing.
I know, that's what we got to do.
Yo, we got a banger for you this show. We got Daniel Lauture, who's here. Daniel, welcome to the show, my brother.
Awesome. Thank you guys for having me.
Oh, man. So those of you that don't know Daniel is I don't know. I always want to say Connecticut guy, but is it Tri-State or would you just say Connecticut only?
I'm born and raised in Connecticut. I've lived several different places.
Yeah.
But I like to rep my homeland, Haiti.
Yeah.
The homeland, the motherland.
The motherland.
That's it.
Yeah, so we're super excited. When we looked at the list about bringing you in, Tatiana and I were talking like we wanted somebody that was going to bring in a totally different space, right? We've talked to a lot of different type of educators, depending on their positions, nonprofit, K-12 folks, you name the type of people. But what we thought was really cool was that you had this whole coaching background. We heard you've done a lot of coaching even at the college level. You've done stuff in high school level. Like you've done all this youth community stuff from these things. But we just thought from your background perspective, it was interesting to watch the dynamics between K-12, coaching, and all these other things. And so we thought it would be great to get a different lens on how you think about being unlearned and unlimited when you talk about the possibilities of education and also the truth about what goes on in our system. And so we're just glad that you came down.
Not too truthful.
Huh?
Not too truthful.
Well, listen, you know us. We love to push. Am I right, Tatiana?
Well, we'll go as far as I like to say, so you won't get fired because we still got bills to pay. But yeah, we gotta keep it real while we're here. Yeah. So let's do that.
Right. Well, so let's get right into it. So Daniel, let's start off a little bit. We always talk about people's background, all that. And we learn pretty quickly. Like we can mention all your stuff and accolades and all that, but we learn that the best people that can tell you about themselves
is themselves.
Mm-hmm. Right? So we'll let you start out. Tell us a little about yourself. Why education? Why your why in this space?
Yeah. Well, again, it's nice to be here. It's a pleasure meeting both of you guys, and appreciate you guys having me. But there are a lot of rich basketball programs. Universities in the state of Connecticut.
Yeah.
So, I happen to be fortunate enough to spend some time on the women's side about 10 years ago with Coach Bozzella, who's over at Seton Hall now.
Yeah.
Huge mentor of mine. We keep in touch till today. And I'd be remiss if I didn't, mention him as somebody who kind of show me what it was to be on that side of athletics. So
you, it sounds, people. It's like I always think about, people who do really well and they they give it. You gotta give all them shout outs and those accolades because you don't want the people who don't do well to feel bad.
Yes.
Yes. But so tell us a little bit though. How did you get to the coaching space? Right. You're also an educator, correct? Mm-hmm. So we talk a lot about how teachers have an impact on children, right? Mm-hmm. But also through clubs and community organizations and coaching and mentorship, all those things also matter. So how'd you land where you are today?
So, basketball, for whatever reason, has always been a passion of mine. And just growing up playing it, playing throughout in high school and so forth, you notice, you recognize quickly that, hey, maybe, the NBA or high level, maybe a little bit out of your reach.
Okay.
But somehow I always want to be a part of the game. And I remember one school day, we were playing basketball in gym class. And our coach, who was also my PE teacher, was playing with us. Mm-hmm. And then, it kind of just dawned on me after class was over. I just said, man, you know what? He just got paid for that. And I said, you know what? He coaches and he hangs out all day. I just thought that this is a good space to kind of be in.
That was before you realized what he was really getting paid, right?
Right, man.
Yeah, well, I will say that, some places do
Take care of their educators.
Yes, very well. Connecticut happens to be a great state to teach in and so forth. But I just realized that I said, you know what, that's not a bad thing. And that's always was the driving force kind of behind it. Because I always wanted to know, I always knew I wanted to be involved in athletics.
Yeah.
So I started out saying, you know what, if I can't do anything with this, I'll just become a coach and I'll teach. And that's kind of what drove it. I figured that out earlier on. So I never went through this phase that a lot of young people go through about not knowing what they want to do with their lives and early on, or probably a career where they're saying, you know what, this isn't for me. Let me try my hand in something else. I always knew that that's something that I wanted to do. And that's kind of what helped me pursue the colleges that I went to and everything else. I started out as a history major at Central Connecticut State University. And I went and I got my master's over at Arizona State University in phys ed. And while I was doing my undergrad, I said, grading papers and all that, it's I don't know if that's something that I want to do forever and so forth. Although you can have a great impact, I just knew that athletics was a real driving force. So I went to Arizona State. I was looking to get out of Connecticut for a little bit, see something different. So I went to Arizona State, and while student teaching for the phys ed program, I linked up with a couple coaches, basketball coaches, where I student taught at, and just got a little familiar with what it is to be a coach. Started out coaching boys and girls. Was coaching the JV girls, was coaching the freshman boys and so forth. And it's not until I spent about 5 years in Arizona, not until after that where I returned to the East Coast. And, the coach I mentioned prior, Coach Bizzella, was a volunteer assistant, but I really got to see it up close and to learn some things from him and his program. His staff was great. And it just kind of paved the way for me. One thing I did learn about college athletics, it's I don't want to say it's a dog-eat-dog world, but the head coach at the time, he took the job at Seton Hall University. And, there's a lot of bouncing around. You see it every year. They call it, quote unquote, the coaching carousel. And I wanted to make sure, I wanted to make an imprint in my community and so forth. So I started applying for gigs in my home district where I grew up in, and was fortunate enough to be hired as a phys ed teacher and coached a couple high school teams. And that led to me becoming the head coach over at Stamford High School. So it's been a journey.
It looks like, and from an education standpoint, it looked like you've been putting a lot of good programs in, right? I know that we've looked at, you do a lot of work around Educated Rising. Is that a part of a program?
Yeah, so that it didn't start out that way. So, a lot of things lead up to where you pivot on kind of how you can make a real impact. I'm thinking, my parents are from Haiti. I know my family, we're one of the oldest Haitian families in Stamford. My grandmother came over in 1962. And now there's a huge Haitian population in Connecticut, not so much then. So born and raised, you knew the heritage. And me being from the city, from the state, you figured, because there's not a lot of teachers that reflected myself. I did have an older cousin, Lewis, who passed away a few years ago, who, taught till his deathbed. And he was kind of like the only model that I had as far as from an education standpoint. But while in school, I never really absorbed that while I was in school and while he was an educator. It was only until after I became a teacher, I appreciated him a lot more and so forth. So, you think that you'll have no way, you check off a lot of boxes. Not so much. And I found it very difficult at times to put yourself in a position or to have someone help you get into a position where you can have an impact on your community. And one of the things when I did finally become an actual teacher in the city, I thought one of the ways that I can do that is by, having an impact on our youth. So the number one thing that I wanted to do was get involved and just, your time is your most valuable thing. Right, and if you can give that, then it's pretty important. So that's one of the things that I decided to do. And, it's kind of helped me make connections with different people and so forth. And I want to give a shout out to the Stamford Boys and Girls Club because, I've worked with them extensively and a few other nonprofits in the city. And but they welcomed me with open arms and, they were excited to have somebody who's from the town and be involved and to just kind of be a mentor, being a male helps. And it's been great. And it's led to numerous opportunities. We just wrapped up. I think this is the 5th year since COVID, the workouts with the police chief of Stamford. They do workouts during the summer with the Boys and Girls Club with emphasis on education and so forth. And we were fortunate enough to be a part of that for many years. So that's kind of how, things led to where they were. But going back to Educators Rising. So my first couple of years, there was a task force put together in our district. It was called the Urban Teacher Recruitment Task Force. And it was, some administrators, some teachers, some downtown officials, superintendent HR, and so forth. And basically the task force was put to how do we recruit and retain more teachers of color or more teachers that reflect the student population in our district. And we did a number of things for many years. For instance, we had like fairs and, teachers would come all over and they would tour the schools and trying to incentivize folks to apply and so forth. And we went out to, different job fairs and talked to people and so forth. Connecticut, there are certain areas where there's diverse. And I've actually read, and I don't know if the folks want me putting it out there, but I've read a few times that Bloomfield, Connecticut is actually one of the top places in America for Black professionals. And I'm saying you got Houston, you got Atlanta, Washington, D.C., and, I did read that about Bloomfield, Connecticut, and it makes a lot of sense now and so forth. They probably want to just keep that to themselves.
Yeah. So well, somebody's going to look up now, right? Bloomfield's going to be on the map.
Now I'm curious. Tell me more.
Let me just give the audience some context, too, just so when you say Stamford, so Stamford, Connecticut is 30 minutes outside of New York City. And I would say going north. So if you take the going north, this is 95 north all the way up from the city of New York City. It's a 30 minutes. It's one of the first I think it's the second city you hit. I think Greenwich, Connecticut's first.
Yeah.
Stamford, Connecticut, right? And so what people don't know is like, people talk about New York City all the time with its 5 boroughs, but they don't know that New York is there's an extension of New York with these being interconnected by states. And those states is New Jersey, which they call the tri-state area, New Jersey, Connecticut, New York, which they call the tri-state area. But 30 minutes outside of that is Connecticut. So kids interact between the Stamford, Connecticut's of the world and within the city of New York as well.
Yeah.
And also one thing too, from a statistical standpoint, most people don't know that Northeast region of the United States, I don't know if you knew, Tatiana, but it's one of the most heavily populated parts of the entire United States.
Yes.
So you probably have majority of the population of this whole country is within that corridor going down to the
I think
south.
all the way to like Maryland.
Yeah, that's right. And then so people don't know, like almost, I think it's like some crazy, almost 50% of the population of the United States is a lot.
Well, because then you also,
in that part of the country.
when you think about it geographically and just the size of the states, people won't think, they do not assume that there's such a massive population, because you look at like California, that geographically is massive, right?
That's right.
Or you look at, Texas,
That's right.
huge state,
That's
right? But when you look at it geographically, you may not think.
Yeah, that's right.
Population wise.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So just want to give people some context as you hear Daniel talk about that. One of the things that we find really interesting why we brought up the program Educated Rising was this whole conversation about this diversity deficit, right? So, and we want to define diversity in the sense of like not just like the differentiation of people, but like this notion is, I remember when I was a part of I'm a part of 100 Black Men, they always say, what you can't see, you can't become, right? And it's a harder connection. I think, Tatiana, we talk about the same thing, you as a Latina female, if you don't see Latina female or female in a position or those things, it's hard to make these type of connections that you can achieve in some of those things. And we find that much more interesting for particular positions, right? In whether it's for coaching, jobs, or whatever. And so the reason we were really excited that you were coming down is because we wanted to give our audience a totally different context of what it looks like in sports, right? Because what people usually see is like, they'll say, well, the players are, Black, brown, whatever they are, but they don't know, like the coaching staffs may look a little different, or they don't know that the dynamics are different, or they don't know that the cultures are different, right? And so like, these are the things that are interesting, but you notice that even in your comments, the connection between you going into education, those things, because you saw another person that you could identify with, right? And identification to me doesn't have to only come from you being, whether you're Black, brown, or whatever. It's just identification of whatever you identify yourself with what you believe you can become, right? You could be a white woman. You could be someone who's from a different persuasion. I mean, you could be in a different culture. And those intricacies I find fascinating because it's a part of this unlearned context of education that we tend to talk about. And so let me give you a statistic, right? And you tell me a little bit about what you think around this, right? So, and this is probably, I would say, a little bit similar to basketball a little bit too, but so a national study, we found that in high school sports coaching, 66.4% of those coaches are white, and only 8.9% are Black in the United States, right? And the reason I bring up we're just using that number is I don't think people understand that in our country we probably have over 355 million people total. If you look at the numbers for African Americans or Black folks identified, that's about 13% of that 100% pie. I think Latino, you're up to like 20%, right? So I think when they think about the larger picture, people don't understand that these numbers are not as far off as you think just because of the population size, even though television shows you.
Well, but what it's also just take that a step further when you think about schooling purposes and numbers. We're looking at students of color make up about 54% of the students that you see in public schools. So you have this, so that's over half, right? We're a little over half. But then when we just look at the lens from coaching perspective, you have less than 10% that are Black coaches. So that's quite a disparity there. That's right. What has been your experience as you've navigated? You've coached collegiately, if correct? Yeah. Yes, and then now you're also a high school coach. What has that experience been like for you? But also, what has that experience been like as you work with different populations of students?
Mm-hmm. So I will say it all depends on what the makeup of the community is. Mm-hmm. And, I will say in the New York City area, even in certain areas in Connecticut, the New Havens of the world, the Bloomfields, there's a great high school coach out in Windsor for boys basketball, Ken Smith. He's got the court named after him and so forth, and won numerous state championships. I guess from an example, like you have those examples and so forth, there are a lot of great coaches, not just particularly high school, but youth coaches on the AAU circuit and so forth, and a lot of different in New York, a lot of different areas. Particularly in Fairfield County, where I currently reside. Part of Fairfield County is considered the Gold Coast. And I guess the expansion of the railroad system has, afforded a lot of people to set up, summer homes in Connecticut and so forth along the shoreline and so forth. And it's just kind of blossomed into, one of the wealthiest places in the country. And the makeup of that is very different from the rest of the state. And so forth. But you have, your different pockets and so forth. So particularly for me, and going back to this urban recruitment task force, it was, okay, how can we get, because obviously there was a need for it. So how can we get more folks into the profession who reflect our teaching population? Well, when you live in one of the most populous places in, the country, and one of the most wealthiest places in the country, it tends to be expensive. It tends to be a little expensive. At certain lifestyles, the opportunities aren't necessarily there. And also from a culture standpoint, it's very hard to pull educators from different areas to come and to throw themselves into this community and so forth. So
was that challenge because people were scared, or because they were unfamiliar, or they could not make a connection?
Well, so you just had to explain where Stanford was and what's going on, and so forth. If you say Atlanta, Georgia, people, right off the bat, you say Houston, people know where that is. Washington, D.C. and everything else like that. A lot of these metro areas, and so forth, Chicago and L.A. So someone being from there, even New York City, that's rich in history and culture and diversity, not everyone is going to say, well, why am I going to leave this to go somewhere that I'm not necessarily familiar? So it makes it very difficult in a sense. But thinking of myself and thinking of, my cousin, my late cousin and so forth. And it was one of those things where, like, wait a minute, we have a minority population amongst our own. And there's about maybe, I would say 90 jobs available, teaching positions. Maybe it's changed a little bit since COVID. But before COVID, I would say about 90 teaching jobs opened up in our district every year. Of that, 20% were former students of that district who got hired.
Oh, interesting.
But of that 20, how many reflect
the demographics of the school?
So the numbers were always skewed. So just after talking to different folks in our community, we thought it was great to build a program from within, a grow your own. Well, we already have a student population, but do they have the access to understand that, hey, you can get into a field like this, have an impact, and possibly come back and serve your community and so forth. So that's where this thought process grew. It happened during COVID. We started out with just a club of 7 students. This was back in 2018, 2019 is when we first started. In 1920, the state of Connecticut, with Governor Lamont and the State Department of Education, launched Educators Rising within the state of Connecticut. Educators Rising is a national program, I believe, out of Virginia. And they've had several districts, but Connecticut took it on then during COVID and so forth. And our administrators, because we already had this club going, it was called Future Educators of Diversity at the time. And because we already had this club going, asked me to teach the class and so forth, not knowing what I was going to get myself into with that Rising.
You just making extra money.
Who knows? But we took it on because I was very passionate about it. Statistics show that teachers who look like their students, those students perform better. There is a huge, I think the state of Connecticut is ranked in the top 3 in education in many different categories and so forth. But there's a huge inequality gap among Black and Brown when it comes to achievement. And, statistics show that, hey, you can close. So when you have a wealthy area, sometimes the focus is put on making sure that status quo stays the same.
Yes.
If you happen to come out of, quote unquote, the ranks or come from, below poverty line and so forth, and happen to, establish yourself, get you, kudos to you. There are programs in place that kind of help and everything else like that. But typically, that's just like in this country in general. If you happen to make it, beautiful. But for a certain population, certain things just can't happen. When you look at
and when you say certain things can't happen, you're talking about access, right? They don't have access. They're not in the pipeline because they don't have the same type of resources, access, networking, or opportunity for programs. Is that what I hear you saying?
I will put it to you like this: in a wealthy, rich environment, if you have folks that are going to prison, not going off to college, not pursuing different careers and so forth, you would have like a real, they'd be like a real commission on how to combat this. You know what I mean? Because when you have access, that's half of the battle. And you are meant to go on and do these great things. And, you're already seen as someone who can continue on legacy and so forth. So if that's not taking place, then it's one of those things where we got to put a stop to it. We got to, we got to really put a stop to this.
Would you, I'm just going to push a little bit. Would you say that type of access is no different than sports? Do you think is sports in the same space as that? If it all comes down to access? I know in schools it's much more clear defined, but like because of disparities and inequalities and that type of stuff. But would you say sports is in that way too? Like, because for example, I'll use you an example. People would say, well, look at LeBron James, right? He's got his son Bryce, who's at Arizona, right? University of Arizona. He's got his other son who's playing with him right now, right? Bronny's playing with him right now, right? But they, their father paved the access way for resources for them to, if they want to go become NBA players, they probably was more.
Oh, you're saying like they have access to elite sports programs.
Yeah, programs, resources, etc. Right?
Okay.
I mean, because when you look at what's the school out in California, Sierra Canyon? Is it Sierra Canyon?
Yeah,
where all the NBA players send their kids to go to school and play, right? But that's a school where you gotta have money, private school, da da da. So, like, I guess the point I'm trying to make is, would you make the argument that access, I guess how am I framing this? So the kids that have those type of accesses, their pathway is much more easier than kids that come from not having those same sets of resources.
So I will say for athletics, it's an equal opportunity adventure, and
equal opportunity, but preparation to achieve at that level does take some set of resources, financial back.
Certain sports do.
Mm-hmm.
When you think of things where you don't need much for equipment and so forth.
And the kids can excel.
Right.
So like basketball. Basketball, you just need a ball.
You need a ball and a hoop.
Yeah.
Some neighborhoods growing up use crates.
Yeah.
And so forth. And
but if you're playing tennis, golf,
football is up there with the equipment. Lacrosse is up there with the equipment. But what I will say, and what you do see happening a lot, is that you do have a lot of NBA parents who kids are now excelling and so forth, rather than considered, a kid who doesn't have that type of, role model or so forth. But you're starting to see that a lot. And that has a lot to do with they understand what it took to get there, and they have access to certain training and so forth. And like, for instance, we have a pretty good player. And he participated on the EYBL circuit this past summer, the Elite Youth Basketball League, with Nike and so forth. And several NBA players have sons who participate in that league.
Mm-hmm.
I had an opportunity. I met Chris Paul this past summer, being around, and just seeing. I know Matt Barnes, who's an NBA veteran, who coaches a team there. You have several, media personalities, several former athletes, several former NBA players have teams.
Mm-hmm.
So you're seeing it a little bit more of players and, community members having a little bit more control on kind of what goes on in their community. Before, I would say the internet, it was pretty much, a coach would find out and, they would go to camps and so forth. And that's kind of how the recruitment process went. But you're seeing that happen more. But when you have small pockets of communities, it's not so much, hey, we need to get, a brother in here because he can help. It's more so much who can have influence, who can have control, and more so how much does the community how much is the community involved in there? I'll give you a statistic. The school is 150 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Of that 150 years, there's only been 8 head coaches for boys basketball at the school.
Wow.
I happen to be number 8.
Wow.
So
that means they've stayed in those positions for a substantial amount of time.
That's what happened.
And the influence didn't matter based on what that coach looked like.
No, because typically, you just have people that stay in positions. It's a legacy thing. And, they pass it down to whoever is deemed ready or necessary to carry on the torch of, the next 30 years and so forth. That's how things have typically done. I had a friend who's a New York city fireman and was facing the same challenges and so forth because, just didn't necessarily look like the mold of what a New York City fireman looks like,
Okay.
or in some folks.
And when you say didn't look like the mold, are you talking about from a perspective of race or body figure?
From a perspective
of age, like
from a perspective of, not to put it in plain terms, people of color are not seen, as you mentioned. If I can't see it, I can't be it.
Right. So would it be fair to say in certain parts of the country, right, where there are, we talked about Atlanta, Houston's, all these places, right? And Tatiana, we could talk about the same context if it was for Latino kids, right? If you are in places where you don't have kids from different families from different type of socioeconomic classes that are represented in particular communities, then most likely it's a little bit harder for them to choose a different, I wouldn't say choose, but maybe say make a choice of somebody that's different from them.
Not choose. Nepotism is a real thing. Yeah.
How would you define nepotism?
It's a real thing. Hi, Sito. I am, a quote unquote a police chief and so forth. And you're coming through the ranks. I'm making my assistant chief and so forth. Doesn't matter what. Obviously, experience plays a part in it. But oftentimes, people know what direction they want to go in certain things, and that was the focus when the Ed Rising came about and so forth. And I do want to highlight that I believe there's about 32 districts in the state of Connecticut that has the program. Because of our early work, we were, I think we're one of the first ones that's starting to get a little return. Of the 7 kids, 3 of them continued on to get their teaching cert. One in particular stayed in Washington, D.C. It's hard to compete with that. The other 2 got hired, one in our district and one in another district. So it's that type of, I guess, it's that type of intention. It's that type of focus that can really make a difference and so forth. And, in my journey, I thought that, okay, great. You check off so many different boxes. This is a home run. Not quite so much. You're met with a lot of friction. You're met with a lot of that's never been done before. You're met with a lot of
you're
doubts.
You're talking about when you get the opportunity.
Yeah. So, it's easy to say, okay, statistics show that things go this way for certain hires. And you think, okay, great. You fit all, not quite so much because as I mentioned, it turns into a real legacy thing. And my whole purpose was to just make sure that those students have had access. And just doing that and just being involved has opened up so many doors for me, and in particular with basketball. Being the first, Black male boys basketball coach at our school at the varsity level, it's met its challenges, but it also has had some bright spots. There's a spotlight on you, which has led to a number of things. 2 years ago, we had a great season. We advanced to the state semifinals, and so forth. We ended up losing, but it was really good. It's the only third time I think that the school has made it that far.
That's awesome.
In boys
Congratulations.
basketball. I appreciate it. We didn't get it done.
Hey, but we're making some steps is what it sounds like, right?
So
do you think, I'm going to push a little bit, do you think because of your success in that space that will pave the way for more Black coaches to get opportunities in that?
Well, absolutely. So one of our hires from Ed Rising is going to be on the staff for the girls basketball team.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it helps in a sense. Now there have been many influential people of color that I've had the opportunity to meet and to look up to within our district and so forth. But it's just something about education when you cross over, because most of the people that look like me, we're security, paras, and so forth.
They
bus drivers.
They weren't necessarily the teachers per se.
Yes.
No, I mean, I think that's a fair assessment.
No,
That
and
is.
and it's something when you step over to that, and then now you're in thrust with it. It's almost like the nerve of this guy.
Yeah.
And I know you can understand that too. But just to reflect on that, we had another teacher of color in our building, retired businessman, had a business in town, did very well for himself, was a substitute. And him and I had many conversations, and he was like, you know what, I think I might want to do this full time. This is just me giving back, and so forth. So he went to an alternative route, got his teaching cert.
An alt cert. That's what we call them. Yeah.
Right. So he went and did that, and is teaching business. Ed is one of the most popular teachers at our school. And he had Congressman Himes, he's a U.S. Congressman for the 14th District in the state of Connecticut. He had him come out and talk to the students in the CTE department. I believe about different, I can't remember what it was, but I happened to stop by. It was in the library, the media center, and I happened to stop by to meet the congressman. So I introduced myself, and that's that, hey, Dan Lauture, and, it didn't take anything of it. Well, him and his office were following up on our basketball season. And when the UConn men won their second national title, their second in a row, I think that was their sixth overall, their second in a row in 2024, the congressman extended an offer for me to join him to the White House. And I didn't think it was real at first, because I'm just like, this can't be real. Like, why would they want me and so forth? So, but anyway, I looked into it, and the invitation was real. And, I went through the White House clearance and everything else. And literally, you receive the invite. It's a surreal thing.
Who was president at the time?
Joe Biden.
Joe Biden, yeah.
That was the Biden administration.
So it was like last year, September 9th. I'll never forget the day. So you get there and you go, and you're literally inside and so forth. But when I got there, because I never got a chance to talk to the congressman before then, I was dealing with his staff. But I wanted to ask him what was so special.
Yeah, like why me?
Right. Yeah. No, you have many different politicians from the state of Connecticut there. Various donors. You had mayors there. It was a big thing for.
So what happened? Were you able to find out?
So I'm like, well, why necessarily me? And his response and his team response was, you did so well with the basketball program and you do so much in the community. We thought you'd appreciate it. So that just hit me. It was just like, yo, you never know who the heck is watching. You know what I mean? That small interaction that I had with him in the media center has led to so many different things. So it was a surreal moment. But it took someone who had a vision of what to present to our students to open the door for so many different.
Bringing someone in of that caliber to speak
right,
to
just
the
it's
students.
a different perspective and so forth, and it speaks to us saying that, you know what, there are people within our community that we can actually like touch and feel and want to make an impact.
You know, it's interesting. And we when we did this podcast, we were talking about it from a perspective of education and culture, right? We talk about things that clash in education and culture. What I find interesting is no matter what the professional space is, right? Whether it's in sports, engineering, like whatever you decide to do, this clash happens in a lot of different ways. And it always deals with, looking at things from opportunities, access to, how things can happen, whether it's gender, race, all those things. And then also the perception of, trying to understand what makes me get more of the opportunity than the other. I think people ask that question all the time, right? And I always find it fascinating. The reason I was pushing a little bit, like, is this the same in sports? Is this the same in this? Is it the same in that? Because we hear arguments or we hear perspectives on our show around a lot of different issues, right? And what we're trying to figure out is, one, what should people out in the audience understand that even though you may have been taught this or you may be in a circle of folks that believe in this particular way, right? What is the thing that they should unlearn, right? Because how things really happen. So, and what I would argue, what I heard from you in terms of unlearn is, regardless, even though you got opportunities because, you were in the right place, right time, you probably did the right thing or whatever connection, it opened up other doors, right? Or you did this program that helped pave the way for other minorities to get. I mean, these things are things there's somehow you didn't let a particular barrier or a particular thing let you get into a space where you could not begin to see yourself in that space and achieve, right? Because how many people are ever going to say, I've been to the White House? I don't know a lot of folks who want to say that. We're probably around a lot of educated people, right? Or
I do say going to the White House is one thing. Being invited
is a whole
nother ball game.
But I'm saying is like, to me is what you should unlearn to me in this space is that one is you just never know your opportunities. You got to take every moment and connect to that. Two, take advantage of every program that you can, regardless of your color, where you come from, your socioeconomics, what neighborhood, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And the third thing I would say is what I'm clear about is make sure you feel that you belong, right? Like this congressman, you didn't know him from any place, right? He picked you because you did a great job, et cetera, et cetera. Why this to me is so fascinating at this point in time is because right now in America, we're dealing with a clash, I would argue, of cultures and all these things, right? And you can make the argument no matter what side you're on politically around this. But I still think at the end of the day, opportunity is opportunity, right? And you still got to figure out how to navigate through that opportunity, right? And it doesn't matter where you come from, what you look like in that space, but you got to figure out how to navigate, right? Funny joke, right? So my mom, I grew up in a house speaking another language. I learned English in school. You know what my mom said to me? She said, if you don't speak English, ain't nobody gonna speak to you. So I want you to learn how to talk a lot.
Interesting.
This is the reason why I talk a lot. Right? I just who would have known? Right. I talk a lot. And why do I do that? Because if I don't open my mouth to talk, ain't nobody gonna talk to me. It didn't matter what education I had, what degrees. My mom didn't believe all that. What she believed was, guess what, bro? You just got to talk.
Yeah.
Right? And you'd be surprised the opportunities that open up because of that engagement. Which I argue sometimes is my fear around technology and all that, around interconnection, because I think that has changed what that dynamic looks like with the generational gaps and everything. But I wanted to bring that up. Let's talk about this. We got just a little bit of time left. What are the possibilities, would you say, that you are navigating? I don't know how, Tatiana, you want to frame that.
Go ahead.
But like when you think about kind of navigating through your experiences, you founded a national, recognized program, you attended the White House ceremony. And what's the most single important lesson that you would, if you could tell thousands of people or kids or parents or adults or people that are listening right now that you would say, you should really think about as you kind of navigate? What would that be?
So to add to answer your question, but also to add to your unlearned experience, I also would add to always don't be afraid to stand up for what's right as well. In education, policy is policy. And I think it's important. Like, you can sit up here and say, hey, we're going to change this, we're going to change that. And I can, push for certain things and so forth. But legislation and policy are the two biggest things because that outlasts me. You know what I mean? If you're able to help push legislation through, to help push policy through and so forth, one day we're all not going to be here. So the folks that's coming behind us can maybe one day benefit from, moving the goalpost a little bit. And I think that's important. One of the things that I do want to stress is that I don't think I'm necessarily done. I did mention one of somebody I knew after the White House. He said, "Man, congratulations on attending or going to the White House and so forth." I was on the tail. I plan on going back. You know what I mean? Because I was hoping, at some point, I can help a group, a university, a college program at some point gain recognition to where we can necessarily go back. I know, and I say this, I've had the opportunity to attend a few of the UConn men's basketball practice and so forth. And, Coach Hurley had a pretty funny quote. And as he was there, he goes, you don't get invited here for triple doubles. You know what I mean? You don't get invited to the White House for leading the league in scoring and so forth. Only championships. And that's something that I want to continue to strive. The folks at UConn, they really, my whole life they've been winning. And they've really set the standard and the bar, and the coaches have continued that legacy. And it's something that's inspiring. So that's something that I want to continue to do, whether, wherever it is. It's just something that I want to make sure I continue to push. And also for folks to not be afraid, sometimes we pigeonhole ourselves and we sometimes, well, maybe I'm not good enough to be a superintendent. Maybe I'm not good enough to be governor. Maybe I'm not good enough.
Or they're waiting for people to validate them.
Right. And if you stand on the sidelines and wait for somebody to kind of pick you, progress is never going to be made. I'm not fortunate enough. As I mentioned, my grandmother came over in 1961, and my mother graduated from the same school that I now teach at, and so forth. Barely speaking the language.
That's awesome. And
so forth. And what I'm saying is, we weren't affluent at all. Don't come from quote unquote privileged background and so forth. And if you're sitting back waiting for that validation, it's never necessarily going to happen. And that's why I just make it a point to stress, if you fall in line with something and you have a passion for it and you're going about it the right way, there's no bad thing as good trouble. Yes. So
now I want to ask you one last question. If you had one thing to share with someone who is coming up in the coaching world, that may look different, whether it's from the gender standpoint, from a socioeconomic standpoint, from a racial standpoint, than the youth that they're serving. what would you say to them in order to, do good work?
So
what would you say?
I would definitely say find a mentor, someone who has your best interest and is going to help you through the steps and challenges. You can say I've done a lot. I don't feel that I've done enough or that much at this particular point in my career, and I have much more room to grow. So there's going to be challenges ahead, but there's also going to be things that I've learned from through this journey. So I would definitely say, get with someone who's going to really pour into you, but also to mentor.
Mm-hmm.
So
get a mentor.
So to be a mentor, but also be a mentee.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And education, education comes from, the Latin word educo, and it's to bring out what's within. And it's you're a lifelong learner. And if I want to excel, yes, we are discussing, what happens on the court, and it has an impact. I'm passionate about it too. But the greatest impact that I have is in the classroom. Now, I teach phys ed and health. I get it. You know what I mean? But the greatest impact, because not everybody's an athlete. Not everybody like myself. I thought I was going to do great things as a player, as far as that. But not everybody has that. But everyone has the ability to learn. Everyone has the ability to inspire. Everyone has the ability to make change. And it's just important that you pour in every day. You don't get into this profession to just check your hours, clocking time to retirement, and so forth. Hopefully you're getting into this profession to make a real difference, to make a real change, and so forth. And that's got to just be the leading, because there's going to be challenging days. Yeah, there's going to be challenging years, and it's probably never going to stop. My father always said, no place is perfect. So if you do find a place that's perfect, leave, because you'll probably mess it up.
Wow. Wow.
So it's just one of those things where
I haven't heard that one. I may have to take that one with me. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Listen, so Daniel, we appreciate you coming to the show. Super excited. If you guys if you like this show, make sure that you contribute. Please make sure you share, like, and subscribe. Daniel, we appreciate you coming out. It was really great.
You having me. I would love to come do this again.
Yeah, awesome. Absolutely. We wanted to get different lens and perspective into folks that are in different spaces around this whole work around Unlearned Unlimited approach. And our goal all the time is to try to show not only the things that we think, the things that we learn that we find out later on that's like, wait a minute, that doesn't really apply in real life. But also, what are the unlimited possibilities, right? And it's clear to us that you have pretty much, over and exceeded beyond these unlimited possibilities, which I'm not surprised about your success, seeing how you view things in this work. And so we really appreciate that you took time out your schedule to come down to the studio and talk to us about that. So to the rest of everybody else, make sure that you share, like, subscribe. You can find us on all of our social media platform. If you have any comments or anything for Daniel, please make sure that you let us know. We'll give you Daniel's information as well. Sure. We love to get our audience, when they have questions, we send it to our guests and they can kind of like continue this conversation. All the time, our hope, Daniel's always, me and Tatiana are trying to make sure that people can see various folks from different spaces that have done some amazing things, and we find you as another innovator in that space. And so we appreciate you coming out.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Another banger. We'll see you next time. Please make sure, share, like, subscribe, and we'll talk to you soon. And thanks for listening. Unlearned Unlimited.